introduction. Thank you to my colleagues Isabel and Charlotte for inviting me here to Birmingham now for a second time. It's such a pleasure to be here 2 years ago. My wife and I are frequent visitors to Britain, and it's always a pleasure to meet with academic colleagues in the various universities, and once more to be here in Birmingham, and an honor to actually deliver this talk in memory of Rabbi Tann, whom I did not know, but from whom I've heard quite remarkable things, both from people here locally and other colleagues who had the pleasure of knowing him and meeting him over the course of his years here at Birmingham. So I appreciate greatly the ability to be here with you this evening, and to talk to you about a revolution which is occurring as we speak, as we stand, as we sit in the early 21st century, the digitalization of scholarship, and in this case, of a very, very rich manuscript tradition in the field of Jewish studies from before the age of printing. So although we're here in 2012, you can imagine that you were now in the 16th century, in the 15th and 16th centuries, you would have a similar revolution happening, of course, as the world moved from handwritten texts, our word manuscript meaning something written by hand, to the age of printing, with Gutenberg's invention of movable type, and it only took a few decades after that, when certain developments happened here in Britain, William Caxton bringing the first printing press from the continent here to England, and in Italy, the development of a Hebrew font as well, so that by the late 15th century, you already had the beginning of Hebrew printing. We're not going to talk about any of that. We're going to skip over those 500 years from then till today, because we're talking about the revolution that's occurring now, which is making accessible to all of us a rich array of texts that we've always known about, but which one could access only by traveling to far-flung, relatively far-flung places like Parma in Italy and Budapest in Hungary and so on and so forth. I'm sorry to tell you that we will never have to travel again to visit a museum or a library, because it will all be on the internet by tomorrow. Okay? And what I want to do is give you a sampling of that. And what the handout does for you is simply give you something to take home with. You're welcome to follow me on the handout as we go, but you're simply, all this is just to give you a guide with the guideposts along the way, so when you go home you can dazzle your friends and family members with showing them these medieval texts, and in some cases ancient texts, as we'll see, all of which are available now on the internet. And I'm going to go through this process in chronological order of the date of the composition of these texts, which means we're going to start with the Bible. So those are not necessarily we have to distinguish between date of composition and the date on which the manuscript is actually dated, right? So we do not have autographed copies of biblical books written by Isaiah or Jeremiah. What we have are great medieval copies of them. And if you are not familiar with the word, let's meet the word codex, which is the forerunner of the book, and the plural of which is codices. So when you hear me say codex or plural codices, this is all new to you. Think of index, plural, indices, and so on and so forth. The Bible, the biblical books, of course, are written in ancient Israel, and they date approximately from 1100 BCE, the earliest archaic poetry in the Bible, down to around 164 BCE, the last composition that makes it into the Jewish canon, the book of Daniel. So we do not have copies from that almost 1,000-year period. As I said, we don't actually have a copy that Isaiah wrote down, or Jeremiah, or one of their scribes wrote down, more likely. What we have is the development over the course of, in this case, millennia before you arrive at this. We have two great medieval codices of the Bible, complete copies of the Bible. Now I have to qualify that for you, because only the second of them, which we'll get to in a moment, called the Leningrad Codex or the St. Petersburg Codex, is actually extant complete. I begin, however, with the older of the two, which is the Aleppo Codex, which you're looking at right here. The Aleppo Codex, as per its name, was housed in Aleppo in northern Syria, a city which is much in the news now, with great horror on a daily basis occurring there. And it was in the synagogue of the Jewish community of Aleppo down to the year 1948. It dates to approximately 900 CE, at 930 I've written here, and it was written in Tiberias in northern Israel. It spent time in Cairo. It then made its way to Aleppo during the Middle Ages and was housed in the Aleppo community in the synagogue there, as I said. Early in the 20th century, scholars actually visited Aleppo and saw the complete codex, from the beginning of Genesis to the very end. What transpired in 1948, with the establishment of the State of Israel, the Syrian community and or government unleashed a pogrom against the Jewish community in Aleppo. The Jews of Syria all left. The vast majority of them wound up in the US. Small numbers wound up in Israel. And the synagogue was set fire to. It was feared by scholars that the Aleppo Codex was lost. But within a decade, it actually surfaced in Israel. And it is now housed in Jerusalem. It is actually owned by the Institute, which is an institute set up for the study of Sephardic Jewry, but it is on display at the Israel Museum, specifically in the Shrine of the Book, which is more famous for its presentation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Unfortunately, the Codex was not photographed in advance of 1948, so we do not know what Genesis onward looked like. We have about 70% of the Codex survive and surfaced in Israel under circumstances which are still very much unknown. Missing is most of the Torah, so it doesn't begin until you get to Deuteronomy chapter 28, and then we're missing the end of the Codex as well, and an occasional leaf in the middle. But fortunately we have, as I said, so much of it. And what we're going to do this evening is go back and forth between these images that I had, and I've captured one image here of the page, and the internet links. Let's go back again. And this is the website of the Aleppo Codex, where you now can read any page of this great manuscript. So there's an introduction here for you, where you can learn all sorts of things about this remarkable manuscript. And then if you want to actually read the text, if the internet works, here we go. It's making a minute to load. You'll see in a moment, and if it doesn't, we'll just, if it's going a little bit too slowly, we can just already envision what you see here. You see at the very bottom, it tells you Deuteronomy chapter 28, verse such and such. So that's the first page that's going to open up. But then you can click on any biblical, through the pull-down menu, on any of the verse, any book, chapter, and verse that's extant in this manuscript, and you can begin to read the Aleppo Codex on your own. Okay? We're getting a little bit too dark. Okay. Do we have a little more light? So I'm not going to play too much with this. If you get the idea as to how the Aleppo Codex website works. And I'm not seeing the actual, I think there's supposed to be another pull-down menu over here. But you can, let's just click on next, or turn the page, there we go. Literally turn the page. Everybody watching this? So this is what technology is doing today. For those of you who know the biblical text, this is the layout of Deuteronomy 32 right here. And in a minute, you come to the end of the Torah, and you'll have to go on to the next book of Joshua. So the scholars of Jerusalem have done this technology for you. Now, the Codex includes all of the, what we call the Masoretic apparatus. We're going to come to Dead Sea Scrolls soon. You will see that the scrolls, copies of the biblical text and other Dead Sea Scrolls, write the Hebrew with the consonants only. And those of you familiar with the way the Hebrew language operates, in the early Middle Ages, a group of people called the Masoretes created a system of notating the vowels and the punctuation and the accentuation, which is what all the little dots and dashes below and above the letters look. But again, you can go and see and check any reading you would ever want in the Aleppo Codex online now. I mentioned that this manuscript spent some time in Cairo. It was there in the 12th century in Cairo. This is the time of Maimonides. We'll come back to Maimonides later on. Maimonides believed that this was the most authentic copy of the Bible that he had ever seen. And so this is the actual text still available to us today. You don't have to go to Jerusalem. You can just go home and look at it tonight. Here's a close-up of Joshua chapter 1, verse 1, just to give you a sense of what you can do when you look at these images. And then I copied it out there for you in Hebrew type font as well. But you can see the one-to-one correspondence between what you see in the manuscript and what you see on the type font at the bottom. The second of the major codices from the Middle Ages is completely extant. It's from about 80 years later. It's called the St. Petersburg Codex or the Leningrad Codex. It was also written in Tiberias in the year 1009 CE. As far as I am aware, there are still no digital images of this manuscript. Hopefully that will occur still in the years or decades ahead. But I just wanted to call it to your attention so that I can take it to see the manuscript itself, other than show you one photograph of it here. And as I've indicated, you can get an accurate transcription of it at a particular website, but that's just going to be typed out. It's not going to give you the photographs of the actual Codex pages. Just an aside as to its name. On my handout, I noticed I just called it I called it Leningrad and St. Petersburg in parentheses on the first go. Here I switched it around to St. Petersburg with Leningrad in parentheses. So the manuscript was known already in the 19th century, but it wasn't published in book form until around the 1920s. When the scholar who took care of the publication of this manuscript so that everybody could use it, the city, of course, was called Leningrad at that time, and he called it the Leningrad Codex. The city, of course, has reverted to its previous name, St. Petersburg. More and more scholars I now see are calling it the St. Petersburg Codex, sometimes with Leningrad in parentheses, sometimes without. Our friend Jim Charlesworth, for example, I see is quoting it now as the St. Petersburg Codex, and I'm going back and forth. But I do find a bit of humor that hundreds of years from now, the name Vladimir Lenin will be forgotten, but somebody will still know the Leningrad Codex from that name because the city was called Leningrad at the time when this text was first published. This is not a website per se, but I just wanted to show you that there are Bible programs which you can purchase if you really want to do some amazing work in the Bible in the digital way. There are two programs, one called BibleWorks for the PC and one called Accordance for the Macintosh users, although you can also now run Accordance on the PC with a Mac emulator, which allows you to do all sorts of searches and find things in biblical text that you would never know. It would have taken you a long, long time doing all sorts of research. So if you wanted to know, for example, every time for the, excuse me if you don't know Hebrew, but if you wanted to know every time in the Bible that the word kavod, honor, and the word kadosh, holy, appeared in the same verse or in adjacent verses, I'm just picking a search at random, right? It would take you an awful long time to work through old printed concordances to figure that out. These programs, either BibleWorks or Accordance, allow you to do that in a nanosecond. And I myself have discovered things that I wasn't even looking for by searching for something else. And then the search showed me something and said, well, that's really interesting, right? Because these programs are just remarkable. They're not quite on the internet, but you can find quite remarkable search capacity that was previously unavailable to us. So we had reference in the introduction to local expertise in the Dead Sea Scrolls, and of course I can come to Birmingham and be hosted by Dr. Hempel and I'll show a little bit of this. The scrolls, the ongoing fascination with the Dead Sea Scrolls. In 2011, Google announced a partnership. This was last year. I told you the revolution is occurring as we speak. In 2011, Google announced its partnership with the Israel Museum, and slowly but surely is putting up on the internet all of our Dead Sea Scrolls. So this is one image of the great Isaiah scroll, known as 1Q Isaiah A, 1Q meaning it comes from Cave 1 in Qumran, the first of the Isaiah scrolls that came out of Cave 1, hence the superscript A. And if we follow this link at the bottom, it'll bring us bear with me. Here we are. It brings us to this Google page, or the Digital Dead Sea Scrolls page, and you can click on, at the moment, these 6 major scrolls are the first ones that have been put up. So you can go to biblical manuscripts, or the one biblical manuscript that you see here. Actually, there's just 5 texts that are available right now. You can go and click on the great Isaiah scroll. I showed you one picture of it, right? And you can actually now look. Did everybody see that? I scrolled down, right? You can now click on any aspect of, and you can do this. You can increase the size. You can scroll in and see any word that you might want to see on any biblical text at this point in the book of Isaiah. You get a sense of how this works. May you all visit Jerusalem, but you don't have to. It's all here for you right now. Okay. Let me just see this. Let me start this again. And you'll notice in this image, you can put your cursor over a verse, and it highlights the verse for you. Everybody see the coloring? And tells you that it's chapter 2, verse 4. Which is quite, I did that simply by coincidence, but that happens to be a very famous verse in the Bible. That's, they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Okay, that's actually the verse of Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4. That was not planned, okay? But you can put it anywhere and find whichever verse, and it's all highlighted for you. And then, as you saw, zoom in. And get the reading of how the people at Qumran were copying the book of Isaiah, and hopefully Google will continue this. I know they're working on it right now. We share a colleague, Shani Zorek, who's working on this right now in the Israel Museum, who's a Dead Sea Scrolls scholar, who's engaged with this project. It's just remarkable what's happening in the world of putting all these scrolls available. And then, of course, non-biblical scrolls, that is to say, compositions written by the community who left us the Dead Sea Scrolls, the vast majority of scholars, including the Dead Sea Scrolls scholars in this room, associate that group with the Essenes. You can begin to see their compositions as well, and get really good images, and again, zoom in as much as you would like. There's also a program, and I have it listed here. Oh, I didn't put it on the handout. It's called the Dead Sea Scrolls Electronic Library. These programs that I refer to cost several $100s. So if you actually really are interested in doing any of this kind of stuff, you can purchase these things. And the Dead Sea Scrolls Electronic Library also has photographs such as this, which you can see here. And you can zoom in also in that program. This is a very famous composition, and I couldn't come to Birmingham without showing you the Damascus document. There are scholars who actually can piece all these fragments together, like our colleague Dr. Hempel here, who's working on the Damascus document. He's actually written on a previous text, the MMT text as well. It won't be long before you won't need the Dead Sea Scrolls Electronic Library program. I mean, we'll do other things for you, like word searches and grammatical searches and stuff like that, but these photographs will little by little be coming online through the Google project that the Israel uses. So really wonderful stuff that's happening. There's the Dead Sea Scrolls Electronic Library program for you under the general editorship of Immanuel Tov at Yale University and Donald Perry of Brigham Young University. Okay, we now move, so we've gone Bible, chronologically, Dead Sea Scrolls, which are from about 100 BCE, 1st century BCE, and we're now jumping ahead a few more centuries, going in the order of composition to the Mishnah. The Mishnah is the earliest rabbinic composition or compilation that we have, and the earliest codification of Jewish law. The Mishnah has been printed, of course, since the early days of printing, already in the late 15th century. But those printers, and I mentioned Italy in particular, and other places in Europe where Hebrew printing presses were eventually set up, when they set out to print the material, print these texts, of course they had before the manuscript, right? They were using manuscripts that they had in their local libraries or in their local private collections or whatever. And somebody would read it, and somebody would set the font, or the printer himself would go back and forth between the manuscript and the printing, setting the type and so on, until you had a book that was created. So of course that wasn't always, before the age of printing, you had, again, a very rich manuscript tradition of all of these classical Jewish texts, including the Mishnah. No two manuscripts agree, right? Every text of the Mishnah from the Middle Ages reads differently from another text. Now, originally we know that these texts were transmitted orally and then only later on written down in manuscript form. This will be true, by the way, of every text that we look at from now on. The Mishnah, the Talmud, the Passover Haggadah. No two texts from the Middle Ages read the same. If you begin to look at the manuscripts. What happened in the age of printing, right, this is the wonder of printing, is that a printer set the font based on a particular reading that he had, and that became the standardized text. And what it did was bring an end to the variety of readings and the variety of practices in Jewish life based on those earlier medieval readings. I think, my subjective opinion, much to the detriment of the vitality of an ongoing tradition which allowed for different manuscripts and different readings, and as I said, different practices sometimes based on those different readings. Now, of all of the Mishnah manuscripts, the best of them, the most reliable by those scholars who have done the comparison, is this one, and it's in Budapest. It was written in Italy, circa 1200, in the middle of the Middle Ages, and it's part of a collection of the David Kaufman, he was a scholar in Budapest in the 19th century, manuscripts which he collected and are still there. You realize as we now segue into this material, it's true of the St. Petersburg Codex as well, but from all the material that I'm now going to show you, these have been guarded over, curated by, lovingly, endearingly, by museum and library people for centuries now in Europe, typically by non-Jews who have been in charge and have this great cultural legacy of Hebrew manuscripts from the Middle Ages, which have survived the vicissitudes of the centuries, and may I mention, of course, that means both great upheavals and, of course, world wars, the most devastating of them in the 1940s in Europe, and yet all these manuscripts are still there in museums and libraries. The Cowpens Manuscript, this is probably my favorite of everything we're going to do tonight. The Cowpens Manuscript, sometimes these things come up. Yeah. The Cowpens Manuscript is, to my mind, the best of the websites available for looking at any manuscript. So this is the Mishnah, and you can click on any single, they've photographed and put up on the web every folio of this manuscript, okay? So if you just want to go to, randomly, there are 7 pages, by the way, yes, 7 different pages here. But we'll just randomly go to the beginning of Tractate Shabbat, which deals with the Sabbath, okay? So it's actually the first tractate of the order called Moed. For those of you who can read Hebrew, say they're Moed. This is an index of the previous order of the Mishnah, which has just come to an end, or a table of contents coming at the end, as per the practice in medieval Hebrew manuscripts. But here's the beginning of this new order called Moed, which deals with festivals, and the first tractate in that order is the tractate of the Sabbath, Shabbat. Now, I did this just randomly, right? Now, you can read this. This would not be difficult to read, but it gets better than that, folks. If you double-click on it, opening in a new window is this. Much, much better, much easier to read. And, thanks to the good graces of our friends in Budapest, you can actually click on it and save it as a JPEG, which we're not going to do on this computer here, right? But for teaching purposes, this is just wonderful. And look at the detail, and look at how beautiful the handwriting is. This, by the way, is a Mishnah manuscript which has the vowels. Not all of them do, as I will show you in a moment. And we learn a tremendous amount by looking at this manuscript. And the photographs are just stupendous. I mean, this is really the fantasy world. This is the playground of a scholar, right? What you're looking at right here. And then you can zoom in beyond that. I mean, it's just remarkable. Okay. So that's the Mishnah manuscript, the Cowpens website. Okay. There are other manuscripts. The second most reliable manuscript, according to most scholars, is in Parma at the Biblioteca Palatina, which has a very large collection of Hebrew manuscripts. Sometimes we know the exact date, and you'll notice what I've done here, 1073, because we have what's called the colophon, when the scribe will tell us the year, typically based on some legible system that doesn't say 1073 CE or anything like that, or 1073 AD, but we can calculate it based on whichever system he's using, whether it's a Jewish calendar or the old Seleucid calendar. This was written in Italy in 1073, and it's now housed in the, again, the Mishnah was written 200 CE, so this was about 800 years after the compilation of the Mishnah. This is the Parma manuscript. It doesn't have a dedicated website, but I'll show you something in just a bit. And it is, again, a great, great heritage that we possess, giving you what Jewish manuscripts look like in the Middle Ages. I always tell my students that Parma is most known in the general world for the Parmesan cheese that is produced there and the Parma ham that comes out of there. But for me, it's Mishnah manuscripts. The Cairo Geniza was found in the 1890s, and it is a storehouse of documents, 300,000 documents in all. And most of them, the vast majority, 190,000 documents, are in the Cambridge University Library. There are large collections at the Jewish Theological Seminary in New York, and in Oxford, and Philadelphia, and so on. And you can get other copies of the Mishnah from fragmentary, almost all the fragmentary you see here, from the Cairo Geniza material as well. We'll come back and talk about how you can access these. I don't have a web link here for you right now. I'll show you how you can access all of this. Now, it's fun to look at these manuscripts and see different readings, but I now want to show you something that is why it's important to look at these manuscripts. I mean, we're having what I hope is a fun time looking at what scholars have done and in conjunction with the technology people to make all of this available. But now I want to actually tell you something that's interesting about these manuscripts. I told you that the readings are different. Now, this one is going to be a little bit complex. I'll show you in just a moment, which is less complex. Because this has to do with something in the Hebrew language. The biblical Hebrew word for a lintel, right, the thing above the door, is mashkof. And if you can read Hebrew, it's the second word up there, mashkof. It occurs several times in the Bible, including Exodus chapter 12, verse 7. In the Hebrew of the Mishnah, in the manuscripts, the word is different. The word is shakof. I apologize, I should have put these in transliteration for those of you who don't have Hebrew. But this is the biblical form, mashkof, and this is the word in the Mishnah, shakof, a word that is not known in the Bible. Okay, it's the same word, but a different form of it. Now, in the printed editions of the Mishnah, all 6 times when this word occurs, the word is printed as mashkof. Right, from the age of printing, from around 1500 down to today, if you picked up a book of the Mishnah in Hebrew, you would see the word mashkof. Why is it like that? The answer is that the printer, let's say 1500, had a Mishnah manuscript in front of him, the printer knew the Bible better than he knew the Mishnah. So when he got to this word, he thought it was a mistake, and he corrected it to the biblical Hebrew form, mashkov. Everybody following me? And it enters printed editions of the Mishnah as mashkov down to the present day. The manuscripts, Parma, Budapest, and others, tell us, however, that the actual word is shakov. It occurs as mashkov only once in a text that is clearly based on Exodus 12. But otherwise, the word is shakov. And this is what you learn from the manuscripts. Just a little bit about the history of the Hebrew language. Remarkably, this was all confirmed for us by this synagogue lintel inscription, which is now in the Louvre. The synagogue is the Baram Synagogue in far northern Israel, just near the Lebanese border. And the excavators took the lintel down and moved it to the Louvre where it's on exhibition. The synagogue is still easily visible. And I apologize, it's not such a good photograph of it. And the photographer's initials are watermarked over it, as you can see there. But this is a synagogue lintel inscription, right? So over the entrance to the synagogue was a lintel, and it says in Hebrew, "May there be peace on this place and upon all places of Israel. Yossi the Levite, the son of a Levite, made this lintel." And it uses the word, which I put in bold, shakov, as opposed to mashkov, right? May there be blessing upon all of his deeds and peace, okay? The dedication of parts of the synagogue by major benefactors is not a 20th century phenomenon. It was happening already back in the 5th century when the synagogue was built as well. Someone made and donated this lintel for the synagogue. But the word is exactly the word you see in the Mishnah manuscript, so that it all ties in very nicely for us. If you read a printed edition of the Mishnah, you would miss this. Just a little detail about Hebrew language based on these manuscripts. But it gets better than that. In the Mishnah, in the tractate Sanhedrin, which deals with legal issues, there is and I've given you the photograph here of the Cowpens Manuscript. You now recognize it. Of course, we could go back to that Cowpens website, click on it, blow it up, and then I crop it. Right? I can do all of that on my little computer, thanks to Bill Gates. And you can get, see the manuscript right there, but I've written it out for you here. This is a famous passage. Printed editions say the following: anyone who destroys a life of Israel, a Jewish life, brings upon him as if he has destroyed an entire world. And anyone who saves a life from Israel, a Jewish life, brings upon himself as if he has established an entire world. This is a well-known doctrine in Jewish theology. The value of life, of human life. But you'll notice that the printed editions from 1500 onward imply that this is only if you save a Jewish life. If you go look at the manuscripts, which I have photographed there for you from Kaufman, and the transcription of it, I can do it with the vowel this time, made it easy on myself. It doesn't say a Jewish life. It says any life. The rabbis of old were cognizant of the fact that every human life is the same value. So that's what the manuscripts teach us. We can understand why by the year 1500, a printer in a Jewish community in Europe added the word Jewish life, because a series of 500 or 600 or even 800 or 1,000 years of Christian anti-Semitic acts in Europe, of expulsions and blood libels and inquisitions and so on, had led the Jews to have a much more inward look and did not feel that the non-Jewish life was of the same value. But of course, if you go back to the manuscripts, you see what the core teachings of Judaism are. So it's not just the fact that these things are on the web that I wanted to share with you this evening. I wanted to show you what you can actually learn from them. This one is truly remarkable, and we'll come back and look at some others in a little bit as well. We now move to the Talmud. There are two Talmudim, use the Hebrew term, the Talmud of the land of Israel at the bottom of page 1, called the Talmud Yerushalmi. And on the top of the next page, the Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud. These are massive collections. The Jerusalem Talmud, the so-called Jerusalem Talmud, the Talmud of the land of Israel, is a compilation of about 1,000,000 words. And the Babylonian Talmud is about 2.5 million words. How many complete manuscripts of each of these Talmudim do we have from the Middle Ages, from before the age of printing? The answer is one of each. We have one complete manuscript of the Talmud of the land of Israel. It's in Leiden in the Netherlands. And we have one of the Babylonian Talmud. It's in Munich in Germany. And these are now up on the web for us as well. So this is the website. I'm not going to click on it. These files load very, very slowly. We'll be here until midnight before one of these files loads. I'm not sure why that is, but I'm going to show you something better, I hope, than that. But there's the link for you when it's on your handout if you want to go and have a look at these. And you can see all the different folios are listed here for you. Right? Folio is a page, right? A leaf, and remember, folio means nothing more than leaf, right? As in the English word foliage. Okay? So I had the distinct pleasure of actually being in Leiden several years ago when I sat there with the Leiden manuscript in front of me. So instead of showing you the photographs, which would take a long time to link from the website, I thought I would share with you my own photos of the 2 volumes, right? And I was there with my colleague at Leiden, and we had prearranged that he would, from the rare book room, I mean, they bring it out and say, here, you don't have to wear gloves. You can't have your coffee mug next to it, of course, but they just put it on a table and say, do whatever you like with it, okay? So this is the manuscript written in 1289. We have the colophon by such and such scribe from Rome, so we know when it was written. And it became part of the University of Leiden collection, actually the establishment of the university in the 17th century in the great university city of the Netherlands. So here are some pages, just to give you sample pages of what it looks like. The end of one tractate moving into the beginning of another. These are my own photographs, as I said. And I couldn't help but, of course, have my colleague take a picture of me reading it, and with my basic Dutch telling you that this is in situ at the library of the University of Leiden. You come home from an event like that and you're just so excited, you just want to share this with your wife and your children, and they go short. Okay? And then, of course, there are, for any one of these texts, the Cairo-Geniza collection is so all-encompassing that we have manuscripts, again, not complete ones, of the Talmud, the Yerushalmi, the Talmud from the Cairo-Geniza. Here's one example of a nice double page. Okay. We now move to the Babylonian Talmud, and here you have a sample page, and again, we have the colophon, the only complete copy written in France in 1342. It's in the Bayerische Staatsbibliothek, and every one of these manuscripts has to have a name and a number, so it's Codex, Hebrew Codex 95, as you can see here. Here's the link. In the interest of time, I'm not going to click on it, but you can go to that link, and again, every single page of the Babylonian Talmud, complete manuscript from Munich, you can call up and read it on your own. This one happens to be a little bit harder to read, as you can see. I mean, it's the writing isn't just clear. It's just, the previous photos of other manuscripts I'm showing you most impressively, the Cowpens Mishnah, are just fantastic in how clear they are. This one actually takes some time to read, but I thought I would show it to you here, and again, you can explore on your own. There are obviously Babylonian Talmud fragments as well, by the thousands in the Cairo-Geniza. This is what the first printed edition looks like, and all printed editions of the Talmud, Babylonian Talmud ever since, actually look just like this, okay, more or less. It was printed in Venice 30 years, and so if you own a Talmud, most people today use the edition that was published in the 19th century in Vilna, but it looks almost like this, with the Talmud text in the middle and the commentaries of Rashi and the Tosafot on the margins. If you want to access all of these Talmud manuscripts, you can go to the Lieberman Institute, named for the great professor of Talmud in the U.S., Saul Lieberman, who taught at the Jewish Theological Seminary. His disciple, Shama Friedman, who teaches in Jerusalem, has established the Lieberman Institute. This requires a subscription, but you can see very easily all of the manuscripts and all of the readings done there by Professor Friedman. I'm going to show you a way you can do it for free as well. So these are the Lieberman Institute web pages, and some of it I think is free, but others require a subscription. And we're still trying to work on it at my own home university for the library to get a subscription which would allow all of the university to access it. So this is a different website run by the Hebrew University Library, the National Library, which is on the Hebrew University campus. And this one we will click on. Somehow when I do that, it doesn't always take me to where I need to go. There we go. Okay. So this is the website that I'm now referring you to. And these are all of the manuscripts, the libraries which have allowed this is the Manuscript Center of the National Library, which sits on the Hebrew University campus. But there are not all that many manuscripts in Jerusalem itself, except those which have been found their home there. Most of them, of course, are in Europe or at JTS in New York. So here you get a list of the libraries who've donated their, allowed their manuscripts to be photographed. And you can see, of course, some of the ones that we've already talked about: Parma, Budapest, the British Library, we haven't mentioned yet, but there they are on that list as well. And then if you wanted to go and just look at the Talmud manuscript, the interface is in Hebrew here, but I will just randomly, let's do Tractate Shabbat. I'm just going to take page 4A. Okay? So, in this case, there are only 2 manuscripts. Okay? So in the pull-down menu, it'll allow me to see the Vatican manuscript or the one in Munich, which I've already shown you. So we'll click on the Vatican one, and hopefully this works. There it is. So there's the Vatican manuscript of that particular reading that I want to have a look at. This didn't cost us a penny. Believe me, you have to do this. It's more sophisticated, and they run it on a subscription basis. But here you can actually get to see these things right here. Okay? No one's going to go to sleep tonight. You're all going to go home and be on the internet. Because you can just have so much fun with this. Okay? And here you can do Mishnah, Babylonian Talmud, and Tosefta, which is another rabbinic collection. They have not done the Talmud Land of Israel manuscripts yet. But if there were a Geniza fragment, that would come up in the list. I'm just going to do this. Let's take another. No, so this is just not a good example. But sometimes you click. I'm just doing this randomly. I didn't, plan. I just want to see if you do a random search. No, still only these 2. Okay. But sometimes you might have 5 or 6 choices. If there happens to be fragments from the Geniza collection, you can all see them there as well. Okay. Back to our PowerPoint. Where are we? Right. This is where we were. Okay. And here are some more Geniza fragments of Mishnah from Cambridge. Now, there's also a website. Oh, now I'm on the second page here, right, where it says Post-Biblical Hebrew Resource. This also requires a subscription, but this one doesn't cost a lot. This one I know is $50 a year because I do personally subscribe. You can search for any Hebrew word that appears in any text post-biblical. So if I wanted to search, for example, that word shakov, I could search it here. I'm not going to demonstrate it for you. If I wanted to search, and it would give me any word that appears, Dead Sea Scrolls, Mishnah, Talmud, all the way post-Talmudic literature, it would give me the entire set of passages where it occurs. I'm not going to do a search for you in the interest of time, but I will show you on the next image, because I already did the search for our word shakov, okay? And I captured it as a screen image. And so it comes up, and it gives it to me here from, glasses, I think the first one. So this is the Baram Synagogue inscription, which again, interface on this is in Hebrew. But this is the Baram Synagogue lintel, which I showed you before. And then it gives you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Mishnah texts here as well. Okay, so you can read Hebrew. And then the entire passage is written out for you with the word that we've been searching for highlighted. Okay, so you have to get it in a context, right? Not just a. And what What are they using, by the way, for the Mishnah? They're not using the printed edition because it wouldn't come up at all since I showed you that word doesn't exist. They're using the Cowpens Manuscript from Budapest as their database since that's the most reliable manuscript. Somebody keyed it in a database, right? And every single word is now searchable from a website such as this. Okay? My teachers and my teachers' teachers had little card files, right? And little slips of paper in cabinets and so on. I mean, it's just unbelievable how we do all this work. Maimonides, we're now jumping way ahead into the deeps of the Middle Ages. Maimonides' most famous text, his Code of Jewish Law, the Mishnah Torah. The most reliable manuscript is in the Bodleian in Oxford, and our friends at the Bodleian in the last several years photographed the entire manuscript, and you now can access this online as well. And this is probably worth, I do a screenshot as you can see, but it's probably worth clicking on to have fun. Here it is, and it scrolls through, and I think if you click, you gotta wait for this whole thing to scroll through. I'll tell you why this is important in just a second, why they're highlighting this right here. But here's your code. I forget how you enter the site. It's up here. And it's got all this. And then I think over here there'll be a menu of something. Yeah, so it tells you about it. And somewhere you can click on any image, any page of the manuscript that you would like. What I want to show you is this page that they're highlighting right here, and what's so important about it. Again, I've captured it as my own image, right? Cropped it for you. This is not the very end of the book. It's somewhat codex, I should say. It's somewhere near the end of the codex, where there was some blank space on the bottom of that particular page. What you get again is a table of contents in Hebrew. So this is the scribe, right? Maimonides did write this. This is a scribe who wrote this out. And here he says that the second book, the code is divided up into different books, is completed, and with the help of God. And it tells you, again, table of contents at the end, the laws of reading the Shema, the laws of prayer, the laws of tefillin and mezuzah, the laws of tzitzit, prayer shawl, the laws of blessings, and the laws of circumcision. And so that's what this particular subdivision of the Code of Jewish Law had. Again, table of contents at the end. The scribe wrote all that out. He had a great handwriting, as you can see, very, very legible. And then you have this, which is what you saw scrolling when we went to the Oxford Bodleian website. And it says, Ugemi Sifri Ani Moshe the Rabbi Maimon. Maimonides' own handwriting on a white space at the bottom of the manuscript, checked against my book, meaning against my copy, I, Moshe the son of Rabbi Maimon, Moses Maimonides. We don't have Maimonides' hand copy. We have something better than that. We have, because it probably had a poor handwriting, right? He had a scribe write it out, and then he checked it against his own copy. And he wrote it in his own hand that this is checked against his own hand copy. You don't have to travel an hour south to go to Oxford. You just have to go home tonight and look it up on the web. Look at any page of Maimonides' own great classic work from the 12th century, all available to you now through the wonders of the internet. Brilliant stuff. All of the Geniza material that I've shown you is available at another website called geniza.org. It's a great domain name to have, okay? Geniza.org, right? And British spelling with the H, in the US with the spell without the H on the end. This is by subscription, but it's free. You just need to register. Okay, you can gain access to it. This is a worldwide effort to digitize the 300,000 Geniza fragments that exist. 190,000 in Cambridge, 30,000 at JTS in New York. I think they 5,000 or 6,000 in the Bodleian, and then, as I mentioned, Philadelphia and elsewhere. And just randomly, I just go there every once in a while to see what I can find. Right? This is a commentary on the Bible by Sa'adri Gaon. Just one of those things that's sitting there in Cambridge. One of the most important texts that come out of the Cairo Geniza, now available on the web as well, is this Haggadah for Passover. At the very near the very bottom of the handout, I have an entry on Haggadah Shel Pesach. You can go to the University of Pennsylvania Library website where you can see the world's oldest Haggadah. There are two of them, one at JTS in New York and one in Philadelphia, called the Dropsy Haggadah because it was once part of the collection of Dropsy College, which has now been subsumed, an institution which has now been functioning and subsumed by the University of Pennsylvania. And these are the opening pages of that Haggadah. The two institutions debate as to which of their Haggadah was actually earlier. This is the text that's used on the Passover Seder, okay? And so here you have the oldest such copy from around 900, found in the Cairo Geniza. Didn't wind up in Cambridge, this one wound up in Philadelphia. And so on the first page you have the Kiddush, the sanctification, which begins the Passover Seder. For those of you who can read Hebrew, Kiddush Pesach. Can you start reading with me? Baruch, Atah, and so on. You can all see this, right? So next Passover, if you're having a Seder, don't use the one you have. Okay? use this one on the internet. Have it on the screen for everybody at the table, so you'll be able to turn the pages with you. You can see this. Of course, it has the wine stains like every other manuscript does. Okay? And it just continues. Here's the Mishnah, the so-called 4 questions. So-called why? Printed editions have 4 questions. It continues over here. By the way, so the Mishnah, sometimes it's hard to read, but if you can read here with me, Anu Ochlim Chametz Umatzah. So you can read Hebrew. I think that says Halila, right? Probably Kulo Matzah. And then you turn the page, and here's more of it. Okay, so very primitively written, you'll notice, right? This is not a trained scribe necessarily. This is probably some family member who had this at the Passover table in his house. And it continues, Okay. The so-called 4 questions, because when you look at the manuscripts, it's not 4 questions. It's either 3 questions. In the Mishnah, by the way, the 4 questions are based on a reading that's already in the Mishnah tractate of Passover, Pesachim. So you have 3 questions in the Cowpens Mishnah manuscript. The Dropsy Haggadah has 3 questions, the one I just showed you. The JTS Haggadah has only 2 questions. The printers, who probably knew all these different traditions, decided we'll put them all together and go with 4 questions. Okay? But if you want to speed up the Seder next week, you can drop a question or 2, and you'll still be okay, and you'll be basing yourself on reliable manuscripts of the Haggadah from the Middle Ages. Grace after meals. Any text you want to find, you can find it now at geniza.org. For those of you who know Birkat Mazon, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam. The text is slightly different from the one that most Jews recite today. Hazan et ha'olam kulo. B'tu, b'chein, b'chesed, b'rachamim, noten lechem. Okay? Any text you want. Okay? And I apologize if you don't know the Hebrew, but some of these things would be familiar. By the way, this is a book of miscellany because right above it are the names of the biblical accent marks, which have nothing to do with the grace after meals, right? But they're just giving you some miscellany. So, you know, for those of you who know the names of the accent marks, pazer, and so on, although these are not necessarily the terms that we're still using today, they're variants from the Middle Ages of the terms that are in use today. And guess what, folks? I couldn't come here without showing you a Birmingham manuscript because up until now I've talked about such sites as Oxford and Cambridge and New York and Philadelphia, but there are about 30 or 40, I was surprised to learn this just quite recently, about 30 or 40 texts from the Cairo Geniza that are here in Birmingham. How many of you knew this? Okay, and I believe they're at Celio, is that how it's pronounced? Pardon? They have been moved here, okay. So, but you don't have to go to the library, you can just go online and look at them. Okay? Why take the effort to walk across to the library? Okay? Because they're all right here. This happens to be the Musaf, the additional service for the holiday of Rosh Hashanah. beautifully written, absolutely beautifully written, and so well preserved, and now so well photographed. I lifted this from Geniza.org, right? Where, as I said, this is a worldwide effort to get all 300,000 texts from the Cairo Geniza up on the internet. Okay? Just phenomenal stuff. Everybody loves the fact that Maimonides was not only a legal jurist in the Jewish tradition, but also a physician who wrote one of the earliest scientific treatises on sexual intercourse, early medieval treatises. So I just thought I'd show it to you. And it's interesting just to read it. By the way, this was commissioned not for a Jew, but rather for the Sultan, or the nephew of Saladin. Yeah, he was the Sultan by this point. And it tells you what to do to increase sexual potency. Of course, these are addressed typically for men, but it means getting an ox tongue and some lemon peel and some carnation and all that, putting it all together into a nice mixture. These recipes are just absolutely wonderful. The Cairo Geniza yields not just Mishnah and Talmud manuscripts, but other surprises, as you can see. And of course, I just thought I would illuminate you a little bit on what medieval medicine is. Oh, by the way, you'll notice this line, okay? Right? He's writing it for a Muslim, so he has to put in, wine is what you need in this mixture. Right? But for those who do not want to use wine, they tell you you can use some honey, okay? Which has the same effect. Amazing. You're all speechless. Wonderful the manuscript world is. And again, you know, all on the internet for you. My last text is the Siddur, the prayer book, bottom of the handout. This is the website of the Jewish Theological Seminary Library in New York, their special collections website called jtslibrarytreasures.org. If you go there, again, I'm not going to do it with you right now due to lack of time, but you can see that they have many of the treasures that they have up on their website. Okay, so one of them is, as you can see here, this very famous Haggadah text, the Prado Haggadah from Spain around 1300. As it says here, a magnificent codex with artwork. It's just stupendously illustrated. And you can see the entire Prado Haggadah there. You can just follow this easy link and begin to play with these things on your own. It's got the Machzor, several different Machzors for the high holidays there on the bottom right. But I want to focus our attention on the bottom left, where you have this famous Siddur. And again, these things, as I said, they always have catalog numbers. JTS, the shelf mark is manuscript 8255. We are looking at folio 5V, V for verso. There's always a recto and a verso, right? You turn page over, you always have a recto and a verso. This is not only my favorite text, or did I already say that 10 times tonight, okay? But certainly my wife's favorite text. The great scribe, Abraham Farisal, who was a well-known scribe in Italy in 1471. Remember the year, right? Gutenberg has already invented movable type. Hebrew printing presses are being set up. This is the rage of Europe, is to move from manuscripts to print. Just like the rage today, as I'm showing you tonight, is to move from print to digital. So this is the end of the manuscript tradition. Right? We don't, after the year 1500, there are manuscripts that are still commissioned, but it's so much easier just to get the book printed and use the book. We're really at the cusp here in the year 1471. He is the last great Jewish scribe that we know in that tradition, after this becomes a curiosity to have something written out by hand. But here you still have it before the age of printing, of course, by not as curiosity, but the only way you could access a written text was to have it written by hand. When he got married, he wrote out the prayer book for his wife, for his bride, and he gave it to her as a gift. Now, for those of you who know the Jewish tradition, the morning blessings include a blessing, and typically men are the only ones who say the daily prayers. The morning blessings include a line in which you thank God for not having made me a woman. Well, the great scribe, Abraham Farisal, couldn't give a prayer book, the Siddur, to his bride and expect her to say such a line. So the line is unbelievable. What it says right there, you can read the Hebrew hopefully in the manuscript, but if not, he changed the wording. Sha'asitani isha v'lo ish. For you made me a woman and not a man, is how his bride is going to recite the morning blessings when she addresses God with her daily prayers. And this is remarkable for two reasons. Not only is it worded such as this, that would be reason number one, right, that you made me a woman. But you know that the men recite it in third person. They bless God who has not made me a woman. Right, in the third person. This Siddur is to be spoken by the woman addressing God in the second person. For you, Sha'asitani, for you made me a woman and not a man. That's the treasures of the manuscript tradition, all of which is available on the web. I doubt you could find a printed Siddur anytime from 1471 down to the present, even one for women that would have this line in it. In fact, there is a replacement line that women recite, but it is not this. It's rather bland. Who made me according to his will. Right? This is much more beautiful, much more direct, speaking to God, and it speaks to a very important vitality of the Jewish tradition. And when people say to me, how was it possible, after all we've expected from Jewish history, that there was such openness to allow women to say this, my response is, it was the Italian Renaissance after all. Thank you very much.